Happy Friday. And today I learned that Mike's mother, today's her birthday, and today's my younger brother's birthday. So we want to extend a happy birthday or a happy heavenly birthday to his mother and a happy birthday to my younger brother. I saw him for the first time in 10 years last week or the week before. So it was good to see him again. So this is Deep Bird with Unplugged Grief Ministries podcast. We have an exciting special guest, Michael
Gersh. Yep.
Gersh is here. He's a stand-up comedian, author, and as well as a public speaker. He has an amazing story that he wants to share, and he also may go into his funny act, but don't take his funny act as someone who's making fun of people who have died. It's correct me if I'm wrong, Michael. Some people use it as a way they part of their healing process. You know, um, there's another word for it that I want to use. Some people also use it as because they're nervous or something else, but you use it as a part that heals, but at the same time, they say that laughter is the best medicine. You know, I've been watching some of the comedy that even you have suggested, and I tell you, there's not, clean, honest comedy, and it still just cracks me up. I'm laughing. Um, there's one lady, her name is Laura something. She is just so funny, but she speaks the truth. And I think sometimes we have to have an open heart, an open mind, just to listen and realize, okay, that is true. And I laugh when somebody says something because I know it's true, because maybe I experienced it too, right? So comedy can be a healing thing for us. And I'm sure Mike will show us how he goes about it after he shares his story. So, Mike, I am going to give you the floor. Tell us about you, share your story, and then towards the end, tell us about your book, because I know you've written a book or two, right? And then tell us your website and what you're doing to make your grief a little bit less tense. You know, one of the things I've taught people with grief comes anger, and and a lot of people become very angry at God. And I keep telling people it's not a sin to be angry at God, and it's not a sin to be angry. It's what you do with that anger that can be a sin. Like you can either take that anger and go hurt somebody or damage somebody or whatever, or you can take that anger and turn it around and do something good with it. And I think that's what you have found. You have found a way to do something good with it to help you through your healing process. So, Mike, the floor is yours. I am going to put myself on mute for a while, and when I'm ready to jump in, I will jump in. But I want to give you the floor because there's nothing like a good story with a good laugh.
Well, that's a lot of pressure on a Friday. That's too much for me. But Dee, thank you so much for having me on the Unplugged Grief Ministries. I really appreciate the time and to share the opportunity with everyone. So there's a lot that you put in there that I want to go back to. So if I forget someone, just let me know. But uh, Monday is my birthday. I'll be 53 years old, and which means I'm Gen X and in the AARP club, which means I'm bitter about everything, and I get more excited about air fryer recipes than I do sex, which is why I'm so bitter these days. So a little bit of humor, but I'm it's weird. I wouldn't say it's weird to be 53. It almost didn't happen. So let me take you back to September 19th, 1970. Just 8 weeks after I was born, in New York. My father was driving us home from Long Island, and we lived in Spring Valley, which is about an hour and a half from Long Island. And it was around 11 o'clock at night when we were less than a mile away from our house. My brother, who was 3, was sleeping in the back seat. My mom was next to my dad in the front middle seat, and I was next to my mom, I guess the passenger door. And we were at a red light. As our light turned green, my father started to go through the intersection when a drunk driver plowed through the intersection, T-boned the car on my side. The force of the impact was so great, it woke up the neighbors from around the intersection. And remember, 11 o'clock at night, and back in 1970, they built cars to last, right? It was metal, not like today where you can fart on a smart car and it blows over for 3 or 4 miles. They built cars back then. So when the first responders arrived, they found two mangled metals, a mess, and the drunk driver, when he hit us, it pushed us into a telephone pole and split the car all the way up to the dashboard. So the first responders found my father. They gave him CPR. They found my mother. They were giving her treatment, and they found my brother. And 15 minutes goes by, 10, 15 minutes goes by, and someone found me sandwiched between the door and the dash of the car. We were taken to the hospital, and my dad had to get stitches on his face, his forehead, and his nose and his cheek from the windshield hitting him. My brother didn't have a scratch on him, which is pretty much of a miracle, but you hear about people who are sleeping during car crashes and they get no injuries. You hear about drunk drivers who, don't tense up before they hit someone or something and they walk away. Sometimes they run away. My mom was taken into surgery. And as for me, nearly every bone in my body was broken. My skull was completely fractured from one side of my head to the other. So, Dee, the fact that I am sitting here with you tonight is nothing short of a miracle, and this is one of my greatest moments. If I'm alive to talk to anyone or do anything, then that's a good day for me, even though I've had those dark days of depression and grief and trauma. My injuries were so severe, I had to be life flighted to another hospital in New York. So the doctors were telling my dad, well, your infant son is touch and go. We don't know if he's going to survive. And my mom was fighting for her life. I had to get blood transfusions. My aunt, Susan, lost count of how many blood transfusions I had to stay alive. I have 3 scars on my body from those blood transfusions. I have one on the inside of my elbow here, and I have 2 on my ankles. Those are the physical scars. The mental ones stay with you your entire life. I had to be taken back to the hospital for months afterwards to make sure that I didn't have any brain damage. All my friends, I don't think I have any, but my friends will say, "Well, there's something wrong with you." Um, but we won't talk about those people. But despite all my injuries and the fact that I had to be picked up in a pillow for months afterwards, and which was interesting to read about later on about trauma and childhood trauma, about how that physical touch between a mother and an infant is so important at those early stages for development. Um, to be picked up with no physical touch for a while would have those lasting impacts. But I grew up to be a competitive swimmer. I went to college on a swimming scholarship. I have a graduate degree I went to Ashland University in Ohio. I have a graduate degree from the University of Akron in higher education administration. So besides doing comedy, doing a program called The Magic of Life, which I'll talk about in a second, I'm just happy to be breathing. And today was very important because my mother, who was 28 at the time the car crash, did not survive. She died the morning of the 20th due to her injuries. So you're looking at a mother's son who never knew his mom because of a drunk driver. I never had that chance to run home from school and say, "Hey, Mom, look what I drew for you," or "Hey, Mom, what's for dinner?" or "Hey, Mom, 3 simple words, I love you," because of a drunk driver. The word mom isn't in my own vocabulary. The word mother is, and it's usually followed by another word when I'm stuck in traffic. We all know those words, right? But the word mom is like the word the. There's no emotion behind it. There's no love. There's no nothing. It's like a foreign language to me. That word or mother. Um, she would have been 81, and yeah, it was a little bit of the emotional roller coaster today, knowing that I've had me and my brother 53 years of never telling her happy birthday, no cards, no phone calls, no cake, no celebration, but not only for my mom but also come Monday, my birthday, not having that with my mom. That was taken away, that was robbed, that was robbed from me, my brother, my dad, my mom's family by a drunk driver. And around high school, I decided to do something about it. So I joined an organization called Students Against Drunk Driving back then. And when I got into college, I joined a student organization, and I found out there's college speakers. So that kind of put me on the trail to be a speaker. So I've dedicated my life to making sure other people don't go through what I've been through. So I've been speaking to high schools, colleges, military bases. For the last 10 years here in Stowe, Ohio, I've been talking to drunk drivers every month, and changing their attitude and trying to inspire them to make not to drive impaired anymore. In fact, I did a program last night, which was a bit emotional knowing what this day meant. And, I think if you can make a difference in someone's life with humor, and you help them make a better life for themselves, and I think you're doing something right in life. We all have powerful stories, and I've been blessed to be able to share mine. And I've been speaking for so long. I think the drunk drivers is an audience I never thought I would ever speak in front of, because I always saw the drunk driver as the enemy. But it's helped me find a little bit more peace, even though anger um, is there. Anger is sort of my fuel in a way. The sadness is a fuel in my way, in a way for doing these programs. But it's been the most rewarding audience. I remember the very first time when I did the program in front of drunk drivers, and a 19-year-old girl stopped me in the parking lot, and she said, "Thank you for making me realize my son needs me more than alcohol." When a drunk driver buys a book or gives you a hug or says thank you, and you change their life, um, just to have the opportunity to do that is pretty incredible. And I come to the program not from anger, but compassion and unconditional love, and because they've already been yelled at by the judge, they know what they did is wrong. So we make them laugh first. Hopefully, I do some stand-up comedy, and then we kind of ease into the program. um, what I do is to honor my mother. Her legacy has to live on through myself. It lives on through my brother. My brother teaches kids how to swim in South Florida, so we're both doing something that's changing lives, saving lives, down the road, which I think it's pretty important to do. My dad, who passed away in 2018, typical guy of that generation, never talked about my mom. And for me, swimming was a good outlet. It took the anger out in college in the pool. I would swim angry. I wasn't an angry person, D, where if you came up and say, "Hey, Gersh, how are you?" I wouldn't say, "Oh, F off," whatever. It'd be like, how whatever, just friendly. But God, swimming was great because I was angry at God, angry at Harvey Dennison for killing my mom, angry at my father for never talking about it, never realizing he just couldn't talk about my mom.
Do you think that was maybe the way he was grieving, or do you think
Yeah,
he was grieved?
I think it was that generation as well, because this woman named Dolly who came into the equation later on. So let me stop there. This woman, my grandmother put an ad in the newspaper for part-time help. My dad was working overseas, and this woman named Dolly, who's originally from Jamaica, was visiting her sister in New York for 3 months, and she saw the ad, and she answered, made a time with my grandmother to show up, but didn't show up. She said she couldn't find a bus or a ride, and I say she blew it off. But a couple of weeks goes by, she saw the ad again and called, made an appointment with my grandmother, came to our house in Spring Valley. When she saw me in the crib, she said she put her fingers inside the crib, and I latched onto them and I smiled. And she said, "This is where I need to be. This family needs me more than going back to Jamaica to be a nurse or to go back to England where she was living to be part of Scotland Yard." And it wasn't about color, creed, or religion. Look, I have a white Jewish family and a black Jamaican family. And this woman, Dolly, raised me and my brother to be her own flesh and blood. And I forget what side's over my shoulder. There's a picture of her behind me. Um, she'll be 93 this year, and she raised us, no question, like her kids.
Mm.
And that first year that she was in the house, my dad barely spoke a word. That grieving process in that generation, where he just couldn't. And when my father passed away, I emulated him because that's what I knew, right? I knew to keep all that inside. And then my aunt passed away 90 days later. So didn't really, I'm trying to grieve for my father and my aunt at the same time. And that put me in grief counseling because in June of 2018, I almost didn't see the end of the week because I was
Mm.
done. I was like, and not like I wanted to die though, D. I just wanted the pain to stop.
Yeah.
And luckily, I have a friend who's a grief counselor, and I had lunch with her because I had two other friends. We were pitching her idea of stand to grief. We're three comedians talking, doing some stand comedy, but also talking to men's groups about grief. My son as a son story, buddy who's a widower, and another friend who lost his son. And we're having lunch, and she goes, "You don't look well. You don't look like yourself." And she said, go home and make an appointment. And I filled out the intake sheet, and every question was yes, except for one. I wasn't pregnant, but everything else was a yes. And maybe today's day and age, men could be pregnant. I guess that's a whole other issue. I'm not even going to get into. Um, there's a can of worms. I didn't. I'm
I would
sorry.
love to
I'm
hear that
totally
though.
sorry. Um, uh, And so I met with her, and the first question she said, the first statement was, "Let's talk about your mother's death and how that impacted all your relationships." And I wasn't ready for that. I was like, "Hey, I'm here to talk about my dad and my aunt." And she's like, "No, you're not." And I was 47 years old before the very first time I started to process my mom's death. And I was broken. And I was like, "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to feel better." Because I've been through grief and trauma as a kid, as a teenager, young adult, older adult. In fact, when I wrote the book and my had family members who read it, they said, "We always thought you were okay." No one knew to ask because I was a kid. No memories of my mom, but all those what ifs were there. Even though Dolly was raising us, you see, quote unquote normal families, right? Husband, wife, kids, and here was my dad, Dolly, and us. So I always knew something was different, but yet that was also what I grew up in. It was normal too.
Yeah, but you gotta also remember back in the 70s, because you pretty much grew up in the 70s and then
Yeah,
the
I'm a
80s.
'70s kid. Yeah,
Yeah. So back in those days, they didn't have all the blessings that we have now.
yeah,
It was like no real social workers or or therapists or grief therapists in those days,
especially for
because
men, right? I mean, men
especially for
can.
and for boys, because
Yeah,
my brother witnessed his father killing our mother. So there was like there was the trauma there that he had to grow up not getting that help. And he didn't get help either until he was an adult. He had to live with the night terrors and everything. But with you were an infant. Did you have, this is going to be a really stupid question, because I know you were a baby when that accident, when your mom died. But did you still have any like night terrors or
nothing.
terrible nightmares? Nothing
No,
like that?
I didn't, but my brother did in a way.
Okay.
Because my brother was 3, so
Yeah.
when my dad was going to work, my brother Jeff would freak out, separation
Oh,
anxiety. Right, one day mom didn't come home, my dad's leaving, and he's screaming, and they had to do all sorts of different things to try to calm him down. My dad left when he was sleeping. They woke up Jeff, as he left. So that was a big process. It was also a process for my brother to get used to Dolly. Uh,
yeah.
he said one time, for school, she would make the rules at first, and discipline him, and he would say, you're not my mom, you're not the boss of me, that type of fun stuff, as a 3-year-old would say, or a 4-year-old. And the adjustment came one time when it was time for him to go to bed, and Dolly was on the phone, and she said, "Your grandmother would put you to sleep." And he said, "No, I'll wait for you." And he just plopped down by her feet until she was done talking. Now, if you know Dolly, she never gets off the phone. So it could have been years before, she was done. Especially if you're talking to her about tennis, then forget it. But that was the adjustment. So in our house in New York, she slept in my room. And I'd always, peekaboo and all those things with her, in my crib. So that's all I've ever known was her. But at the same time, there's also what did I miss, right? Because you want that type of stuff, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard because on one hand, I'm blessed to have Dolly in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other hand, life kind of sucks because I don't have my mom, and like these anniversaries that come up, and those what ifs will drive you insane because it was like, okay, what if my mom stay alive? Would we have left New York to go to Miami, Florida? If we stayed in New York, I would have been a Jets fan, and that would have been horrible for me as a Dolphins fan. All these things, how my life is now impacting other people's lives through comedy, through the program, through,
Yes.
I'll plug it now, the book. Because this book has helped so many people through their grief and trauma. People don't even know who said they read it and go, your book allowed me to have the strength to go to counseling.
Yes.
What do you say to that? Because you're helping other people, and I was kept alive for a purpose, and it makes me
Yes.
emotional all the time because I'm just a smart ass kid from the suburbs of Miami, Florida. I'm immature as anything,
Well,
and
Michael, the way I see it, because I don't know where you are in your spiritual experience, but the way I see it, God kept you alive and to this point for a purpose, like you were saying,
yeah,
for a
and
reason.
and it
And
was a
He's
struggle.
using you. He's using you because He knew
Yeah,
that you were going to be there to help other people.
yeah, and I guess if you're gonna be used by someone, why not God, right? So
Yeah. And God has a wonderful sense of humor too. So
yeah,
I'm
and
sure He's enjoying your humor.
yeah, and so with the with my life and using humor. So I want to get back to those two things you mentioned at the forefront. Humor for me has been my defense mechanism. It's been my savior. It's been a healthy way to cope through emotions and grief and trauma, um, off stage and on. I'll give you a good example about on stage. I live in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, and the comedy club where I started, the Funny Stop, the owner passed away suddenly from an aneurysm, and I performed at the club last weekend. So that was 2 weeks since he's been gone. Emotional to be on stage knowing that Pete was never going to be there again. You wouldn't hear Pete yelling. He's Lebanese, just a family guy, but everyone was family to him. But we miss his yelling, his bark in the club, and being on stage using humor was therapeutic for myself. It was therapeutic for the audience members, and we knew we were doing a show that Pete would be proud of. So on stage, I use it for my pain as well as the audience members. Because when you're done doing a comedy show and someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, thank you for making me, laugh tonight. I really needed it." Again, D, it goes back to human service, right? Acts of kindness, in a way, knowing that my stupid jokes, whatever, makes someone's laugh and you take away their pain. Because when you come into the comedy club, as a performer, I think any performer will tell you, whatever's going through your life, you leave it at the door because those people want to be entertained. They don't want to hear about your problems, your issues, those type of things. And it's our job to entertain those people. So humor goes both ways for me in terms of therapeutic, coping, all that. And luckily I was blessed with a sense of humor because if I didn't, I don't think I would still be alive. Um, one of the best things I could ever hear in life is someone's laugh. Now, on the flip side, tormented soul, the one laugh I never heard is my mom's. So, 28 years of comedy, years of doing, making people laugh as a kid and stuff. That one's tough sometimes to comprehend. Going, man, I made all these people's laughs, and you remember people's laughing, but man, I wish I had that chance to hear my mom's, to see her smile, to hear her call my name, and that's why I work so hard trying to prevent impaired driving, because I do not want other people to have this life. I'll tell you, D, it sucks. It's hard. There's not a day that goes by you feel a little of that emotion. Um, even though I know how lucky I am to be here at the same time. But with grief counseling, I'm not married. I don't have kids, because I saw the pain my father went through, and I went, I don't want to experience that. So even though I was in relationships, I would do something to sabotage it down the road, push people away. And I really think if I had the counseling early on and we talked about my mom's death and all that stuff, it would have been a little bit different. But I shielded myself from doing that. And it took 40, 70 years to go realize, okay, let's tear down this wall if I'm in a relationship, whatever that, may be.
But you
Um,
also have to remember, Michael, that whatever your father went through does not mean that you will go through that too.
right.
So you sort of, in a sense, I want to make sure I heard you right. So correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't want to get married or have children because you saw what your father went through, but
Yeah, it was just
your
painful.
experience would have been totally different. So you sort of missed out in the most wonderful and the most joyous things of being married and
Yeah,
having your own family.
yeah,
Because I mean, there's no chance. I'm trying to find the right words. I don't think you would have gone through what your father went through because
yeah.
your
But
father's experience was totally different than what your life is.
sure, but I didn't know that though either, right? Because you emulate what
Okay,
you see what you have, right? And then the other
right.
side of it was doing comedy so young, and instead of trying to date, I was a broke comedian. So you try to make that. So you take those factors into play. 24,
Yes.
24, 25, 26. I'm chasing my dream instead of thinking about relationships. So it was a combination of those things. And now that I'm 53, people go, "Hey, you can still have kids." I'm like, "Look, I'm not." No, I'm not. I'm not changing any diapers unless they're mine at this point in time in my life. Um, but again, it's what I knew, and it's what I shielded against. But the counselor was right, and to talk about those things, and it was very very healing to do. It was a heavy 6 7 months of counseling. Where at the end of that time period, my counselor goes, "You look like a different person." I went, "I feel like a different person," and I had a plan. June of 2018. I was done. But my saving grace was I couldn't send my brother, Dolly, other family members back to the cemetery 3 times within 6 months. And I thought about my friends, and I have a really good connection with some college friends. And we lost a friend, Big John Kelly, in May 1st, 2004, where John was the drunk driver in a single car crash, and it cost him his life. And I knew what John's death did to all of us, and I didn't want my friends going through that again either. So, I thought about other people, and I went, I can't do this. Also, all the times where I thought about suicide over the years, I also thought, well, my mom didn't sacrifice her life so I could do something stupid like that. My time will come whenever it's my time. I was kept alive. If we talked about this, God has a plan for me, and I was kept alive for a purpose. Um, so that was another thing that kept me going, and it's been interesting since counseling and reading, Brene Brown's books, and writing the book and talking with other men about grief. Whereas before counseling, before any of it, I never, even doing my program, I would talk about the car crash and stuff, but never really dive deep into depression and those emotions because I was always afraid. And then counseling and Brene Brown taught me about resilience and vulnerability, and talking about this. My depression doesn't have control over me, and it's freeing. So I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to come on here and share my story without holding back, because if I, at this point in time, if someone's listening or watching and it can inspire someone to get help, then it's all worth it. And take that first step. And it's a beautiful thing when you come out of it, counseling and stuff, as a different person, and you get that help and you start that healing process. You may not ever be healed, but we're always healing, right? We're always coping. Your grief is your grief. I can't ever understand it. I can maybe understand sort of those emotions, but I'm never going to understand fully what you're going through, and I never will, because we both know people who go, "Oh, I know what you're feeling. I know what you're going through." No, you don't. Um, yes, you lost your brother or your mom, but it's different, right?
Right.
Um, so we have compassion, we have sympathy, and we empathize. I was
Yes.
what the woman I was dating when my dad died, and then my aunt. She was kind of selfish. And I remember I was doing a program before my aunt passed away, and I got a phone call from my uncle, and she said, "Your aunt Susan has a day or two to live." And I was filming a program for a new promo tape. So I had like I said earlier, I had to block all of it out of my head, do the program. And the girl I was dating at the time said, "I knew you weren't going to come visit me this weekend." That's what she made it about. It wasn't about my aunt and all the other stuff. And I don't think she understood, and again pushed her away. But we should have broken up months before. And then she sent me an email back in December apologizing for how she acted, because she said she didn't understand till her father passed away. And it took me about 2 months to respond to her. I was like, okay, the old me would have fired off an email that day, but the me that went through counseling and stuff went, okay, take a breath for 2 or 3 months. Um, in a way, I want to go, you didn't need to understand what I was going through. You just needed empathy. Well, how about that for a little bit? Instead. But I think that's all we need, right? When someone says, "Oh, my father passed away," you kind of go, "I totally understand what you're going through." No, it's a little bit different, right? We can empathize, and that's okay. But doing this and the opportunity to lay it all out, I have no shame about my emotions. I'm vulnerable to a fault these days, and I don't mind. I think it's inspiring and powerful. Even talking to other guys and other podcasts, because we want to talk about grief and emotions like it's sports,
Yeah.
for crying out loud, and that make it that normal where it shouldn't be a big deal. How many first responders are afraid to ask for help? And was it 22 servicemen and women that die every day due to suicide? So if we could just normalize it more, then we wouldn't lose so many people either. And knowing that I've been so close for so long, knowing what I would miss if I did that, and the people I would leave behind. And yeah, so whenever I get those thoughts, I think about my loved ones, my friends, and I call someone. Back in
Yeah.
2020, I went back to grief counseling. It was, I turned 50. It was the 50th anniversary of the crash. I was hurting again. We did EMDR, which I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, the sensory
Yeah.
stuff, and that helped me with John's death, because I still had a lot of anger towards John, because I was like, how dare he be the drunk driver? He knew my story for 15 years, and the big idiot, because he was 6'5", 300 pounds, still did it. Um, so that kind of helped with John's death, and holding all that anger in was just negative energy, and I had to let go of that anger. There's times I'm still mad at him, don't get me wrong, but not like it used to be. Um, you know, the anger towards Harvey Dennison, yeah, it can be there because he took so much from us. Some people go, "Oh, you need to forgive him." No, I don't. This is my life. I don't have to forgive him if I don't want to, and I'm okay with
It's
that. My soul is just fine
yeah.
if I don't forgive him. Maybe
It's
one
you
day,
not you
but
weren't you weren't really angry at John. You were angry at the choice that he made.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because and he should have known better, right?
Right.
Knowing my life, and we would go out. I would be the designated driver, but that was even his mom said that, goes, he always made bad decisions, and the worst one cost him his life. And making those phone calls suck. And I have a picture of him during my program, the DUI offenders, and I say, look, if you continue doing what you're doing, you can end up like John, and I don't want that for you, your family, your friends, because that would have been his first DUI, and it cost him his life.
And the thing I noticed that you said a little while back that I sort of like applaud you on because not very many people know how to do this. But when you talked about when you feeling suicidal,
Hmm.
that you felt I can't do this because of my family. I don't want them to go through this. I You validated their feelings and what they may go through if you were to take your life.
Yeah.
So in a way, right there, you were not being selfish. You actually at that moment, even if you were feeling suicide, you actually were feeling compassionate towards your family and friends.
Yeah.
And that's what helped your choice to be turned around because you had that in you. But you were aware of it. And but can you imagine if you were not educated, trained, or got the skills, even from your therapist, um, or even your comedy or anything like that, then that choice might have been different.
Uh, 100% correct. Yeah. Because, especially going through what my dad went through and then my aunt, just so
Yes.
much grief and trauma for her family to add another one to that. Oh, they would hate me
Yes.
forever, right?
Yeah.
To add that to it. Then, and I tell people, and it's not really a joke, but I go, look, I don't own a gun because I don't trust myself. I don't know how
Yeah.
to tie a rope to hang myself. I keep Flintstone vitamins around because you can't OD on Flintstones and Barney. But, but
That's,
you know, it's just
you
one of
can
those
get
things.
sick from it, but you won't die from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you can have those thoughts, and okay, you have
Yeah.
those thoughts, but as long as you don't carry through,
Yeah.
and like I said, it was my mom sacrificed her life so I could live like any good parent. I wouldn't want to, disappoint my father. For the life I got, Dolly, my brother, like we said, my friends and family. um, and then also keep doing what we're doing, and trying to save lives and change lives. My work isn't done, as frustrating as it is, because you read articles, 36 people die every day due to drunk driving, and sometimes you just want to go, I quit, I'm done. You get frustrated, but then you go back to court and you do the program and you make a difference in someone's life. You went, well, it's still worth it. Making a change is hard. It's never going to be easy, especially on something called on drunk driving, where it can be socially acceptable, right? Because humans are stupid. We have laws against it, and if we weren't so dumb, we wouldn't need that law. The laws, because we should
Yeah.
know better by now. But people don't set out to be drunk drivers that night. They just don't have a decent plan. Or people are alcoholics, they have a drinking problem. And again, it's just those decisions, right? How do we make better decisions to make life better for everyone else? And that's really what my program comes down to: is choices and consequences. You make good choices in life, you make you have good consequences in life. And you know don't
And we
drink and
have to
drive.
also remember, because now that you're saying that, we also have to remember, Michael, that we don't know what they were going through on that day.
Hmm.
Because usually the alcoholism, the drug use, and all that is to numb whatever pain they may be going through, whatever the life experience that they're going through that day. So we may not, I don't know whether you found out about the drunken driver that killed your mother, but
Well, I did.
you did.
I
So,
got yeah, I got the police report in my 30s. Um, he lied to the police at the scene because he said he wasn't the one driving. He said his friend, who was the one in the back seat, was the one driving. So how about that as a friend for you, right? So when he was taken to the hospital, after a while, like, it was like 3 hours after the car crash, he was being investigated by another officer at the hospital. Noticed his eyes were bloodshot. He was combative. You could smell alcohol in his breath. The reason why Harvey lied is Harvey was driving on a suspended license, 1967. So he should never have been driving, and he admitted to drinking at least a six-pack that night. Um,
but a six
so
pack doesn't make you, does it? I don't know because I don't drink. And I know when men
that's a
drink, they
lot.
can hold more than women.
Yeah, no,
So,
six
but
packs a
six,
lot.
huh?
Six packs a lot at one given time, right? Especially if you
So,
drink it quickly or in a short time period that he did. But he was
okay.
0.10 after, 3 hours after the car crash when his blood was taken. So imagine what the blood was taken shortly after the car crash, not three
Yeah.
hours afterwards. So it could have been a lot higher. And it
Yeah.
wasn't point oh 0.08 back in 1970. I can't remember what it was back then. But I met people at the court who are alcoholics, who have a drinking problem. You have some people who just didn't plan. They were just out for the night. If some people still in denial, saying, "Oh, the cop targeted me," and was like, "Yeah, you blew over a point oh 0.08. The cop didn't target you. Take some responsibility for your actions."
Mhm.
So I met so many different people, and then when they come up and say, "Look, I'm 6 months sober," or a year sober, or we have these wristbands, which yeah, we have these wristbands to say, "I pledge not to drive impaired," and they're still wearing it. I got a buddy that was in a program years ago. He still wears it. And I think that's a beautiful thing as a reminder. And when they come up and they take one, or they buy a book, or again, they hug you, or whatever it is, excuse me, or they share their story about they're sober, and this program will inspire them to stay that way. It's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I'm blessed that the court, gave me that chance. And 10 years later, we're still doing it. So it's
Mhm.
pretty awesome to do.
And I bet they feel a lot better, a lot different too when their body is all that toxic is out of their body.
Yeah, you would hope so, and you're right. I mean, we talk about trauma and how the body stores so much trauma, and for years having that in me. Me and my brother were both swimmers, but yet you carry that with you for so long. And I remember going to a chiropractor, not too long ago. We did some stuff to help release that trauma, through my back, and that's helped. And I was reading a book. What happened to you? It was Oprah and one of her doctors reading about trauma and those and how the body stores so much. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, my body's holding 50 something years of trauma from the car crash. You
Yeah.
know, let's go release that in
And
a
in a
healthy
sense,
way.
grief too. You were also
Yeah.
holding grief that
Hmm.
that happened to me too. I didn't find out more about my mother's death until like in my 30s as well, because I did go to the courthouse and I pulled out all the records, everything, and the truth came out. What was really going on. But by that time, I realized I needed to learn to forgive. And
Yeah.
forgiveness is a very hard thing to do, but how do you forgive the people who are lying, who tell you different stories?
Right.
So, but
Yeah, and we don't forgive them for them. If you're going to forgive me, it's for you, right? In our souls, more than
yeah,
anything else. You can
right.
still hold them accountable, for their actions. But yeah, I'm not quite there yet for Harvey, and maybe one day. But writing the book helped. That was therapeutic because it's not only my story, it's Dolly's story. So there's
Hmm.
stories about her. I remember when we did the unveiling my dad and my aunt's headstones in New York. And it was on my birthday in 2019, around this weekend. And she goes, I remember when you were in your cage. And I was like, you mean crib? She's like, no, cage. And I went, well, that explains a lot now about everything. So when I was writing it, she didn't want me to use her name. I go, do I still embarrass you? But but it was what was nice about her reading it. I flew home to surprise her because I couldn't put hers in the mail. So, and I posted a video on Facebook a few times, and I'll probably send it soon. Post it again of her just screaming with happiness and surprised that I was there. But she asked for a while if I was okay because she read again, not knowing the depression I was in and how close I was to taking my own life. And she raised us like a mother, and of course she's going to ask those questions. And you know, I thought it was very nice, for her to keep doing and go, yeah, I'm okay, or no, I'm not. And to have those open and honest conversations where before I think I'd always be afraid. Just like when Pete died, the owner of the comedy club, how you doing? I'm okay. That's what we said, and we knew we could tell in the eyes. No one,
Yeah.
no one was okay. In fact, when the week in June of 2018, I had a friend take new pictures of me at our very first fundraiser where we awarded officers for their DOI enforcement. And not too long afterwards, she saw the pictures and she said, "We can't use these. You have sad eyes." And as much as you want to try to hide your pain from people, there are some that are going to know you can't hide that pain. And she was right. The eyes hid, couldn't hide the depression, the sadness, the anger, all that stuff, in there. So once I was done with counseling, and then April of 2019, we shot this book, the book cover, and she goes, "Oh, good, we have happy eyes. We can use that." Um, so I know in myself, I can even know now when my serotonin levels drop. Even back in 2020, I was put on Lexapro for the very first time, and I'm not against medication, but there had to be a combination of medication and counseling. There just couldn't
Mhm.
be one, because we both know the brain's going to adjust. And if all you're doing is medication and you're not helping your soul out, that's imbalance right there. So there was
Mhm.
a combination of both to help the chemical part of my brain, but also the counseling helped, I'll say, my soul. And then I was able to ease off the Lexapro because I felt like I didn't need it. And that's what counseling should do, for the long run. We shouldn't be always dependent on meds, because then our brain chemistry is going to change and we're going to want more and more and more. But we also have to do the work to heal, or part of that process to heal. So when I did the book, it's called A Son's Story of Hope After Tragedy, Grief, and a Speedo, because I was a swimmer. I'm not wearing a Speedo now. I know you can't tell. That would be weird. But being a swimmer, look, I had to put some humor into the title, right? Because that's me.
Yeah.
And you're going to laugh in the book. You're going to cry. My friend Greg Morton, who made me promise to write the book, he goes, "Look, I never had anyone make me cry and laugh on the same page." And some people said it was just like having a chat with me by a fire. And that's I didn't know how I was going to write it. I wrote it after over 20 years, and I had an editor, a writing coach. In the first draft, she's like, "Well, good, you wrote it as a speaker. Now you're going to write it as a writer." I went, "Well, what the hell does that mean?" Um, but for 6 months, it was every Monday we had a good conversation, and she gave me homework, and it was always paint the scene, and I never forgot that because of how to write it. And I'm very proud of it. My friend Greg's very protective of it. um, and as you know, if your story could touch someone's life and change their lives, so it's on Amazon. They can go through the website. They want an autographed copy, we could do it that way too. um, but when strangers say your book helped them, or they gave it to a friend that needed the help, and then your story carries on that tradition of helping other people, man, that's purpose for you, D. And it's more than I could ever imagine what my life would have turned out to be. Being almost 53, and having a chance to impact lives, because I could have done nothing. I could have crawled into a bottle my entire life and say, "Woe is me, life sucked, my mom was killed, blah blah blah." But somehow, I don't think my mom would want that for me. It's not how I was raised, between my father and Dolly. Um,
So your father never remarried or
no,
anything?
him and Dolly formed a relationship over time. In fact, he stopped. He had a couple. I remember. I hear the stories now later from Dolly, where he dated a couple of times in South Florida, and I think the last time was when the woman said she wanted to put me and Jeff into boarding school, and I went, "Well, Jeff, I understand, but not me. I mean, come on." Um, but and that was the last time. But they formed a relationship. So again, you take a horrible situation of losing our mom, and my dad's soulmate and all that stuff. And then him and Dolly formed a relationship, much later on. But that's another cool part of my story,
Yeah.
having the white Jewish family and a black Jamaican family, but it was just family. And it was, looking back in retrospect, and how special it was, and how all these things had to line up, fate, and just guardian angels, God, whatever you want to, call it, in terms of having, a life to give back and to help other people.
Wow. So do you have a website that we can visit?
I do. It's not fans only, so no worries about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's called themagicoflife.org. So it's just like the title of the book, but just put .org after it. You can Google my name, Michael Gersh. They can find it that way too. Facebook, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, just Michael Gersh. but themagicoflife.org. Um, the book's on Amazon or Barnes and Noble as well.
Do I'm just this question just popped in my head.
Yeah.
So when you do your stand up comedy, are you doing it mostly for people who are getting rehab from the alcohol and drugs, or do you get booked for other entertainment as well?
Yeah, comedy clubs, VFW places, different lodges and so forth. So you have clubs and those type of things. So it's just like a regular audience. And I
Okay.
talk about my story, as a little PSA. And when I do the merchandise plug of the book, tell them don't be, have a designated driver and so forth. Because I do some jokes on being Jewish Jamaican. Um, so that kind of fits into it because that's who I am. And so I talk about my story about losing my mom and stuff. And so there's a few minutes of seriousness um,
Yeah.
along with the humor. But yeah, comedy clubs and other places too.
So the thing was, when I thought I was going to be planning the next Global Grief Conference, I had planned to put you as our Saturday night entertainment. But then when that was pulled away from me, I go, well, there goes that entertainment.
Well, we always find
We're
another
gonna
time, right?
lose that. We're gonna lose this because I had it all planned in my head, and I'm
Well,
like, okay.
we always try it another time, D.
Hmm.
It'll be fun to do.
Well, I am so glad that we had you come on, and I I really enjoy listening to you. I feel that um, there's some parts of your story that I am familiar with because of what even what I had to go through. You lost your mother about the same time I lost my mother, and as children, we grieve, but we don't realize we are grieving, and we don't know how to express it. So we grow up still with all that pain inside of us,
Hmm.
and it's unfortunately it's not until we become adults before we finally get grief therapy. You
Right.
know, and that's why I think it's so important nowadays that children, when they lose a parent, whether they something that there's that emotional loss, that they should have that kind of a therapy, so their feelings can be validated, and they can figure it out, work it out, and stuff like that. So, but that is a great reminder how important children getting therapy nowadays that we didn't have back in the old days.
Right.
So, because nowadays, now it's over. There's so much of it. Not, those days, it was like none.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
so we're blessed nowadays. Even if we had to wait till we were adults to get help, God still found a way to help prepare us what He had planned for us.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And we don't know what God's plan is for us. But we wonder, why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? And we go through different types of emotional losses throughout that whole time as well. But that is God's way of preparing us and how He was going to use us now. So He's using you through your book, through your public speaking, through your comedy. So you are blessed in multiple ways to be able to help people, with their alcoholism or their drug abuse, through their grief. And I'm glad, I'm thankful that I met you and had this opportunity to speak with you because it gave me, so now I can say, look, I know the exact person you should talk to. And the other thing that also that you guys do, that when I met Tony, I was so excited about, is helping men grieve,
Hmm.
allowing men to grieve. Because so many times people don't realize men hold a lot. They
Yeah.
hold a lot. And they don't admit or acknowledge that they need help.
Yeah.
They keep it inside. And if they do, hopefully you pray that they do go get it. And it may be the reason why we have so much suicide because they didn't go get help, you know?
Right. Yeah, and me and Tony and Michael and Jay Lewis and Dorian and Dave, it's and just talking with them about it. We're talking it like I said, like sports, and it was just like no big deal,
Yeah.
and that's what's so fascinating about that connection, right? Because we've all been through it, and we have no problem being vulnerable with each other, and it's just a very cool, I'll say, relationship to have with one another. So,
Mm.
and I don't know if there's people that have questions. I know you said open up to questions. I don't know if we have any, but I wanted to make sure we left time
Yeah,
open.
I've
Mr. White.
asked, and I've asked in different ways, and I'm I have a 7 o'clock podcast,
Okay,
so I,
cool.
I forgot I had her, and I got thinking because I said, "Oh, and here I was taught hoping we would go over," and then I forgot about the 7 o'clock. But I would love to rebook you, have you come back on,
Yeah,
and maybe do like a part two,
sure.
expand more of what you're doing, so that people would have a much more want or need for that kind of help.
Yeah,
You
and what
know.
I could do is later on send me your address, and I'll then I'll send you a copy of the book for having me on. So I thank you enough for this opportunity, and we could talk about the book. That way you can
Right.
do anything, and then you have all of me, to deal with. Once you read the book, and I am working on book two. So I
Oh,
started from 2020 on.
yeah,
Uh,
I'm working on my book too.
oh,
I'm having a hard time though because I'm remembering so much that's I don't know if this happened with you when you were writing your book, but I'm writing my book and so much of my life experience there was so much that flashbacks coming back that it just put me into a I said, okay, I got to stop for now because it was just, especially when I was talking about my son and, you know, the guilt and everything became overwhelming. And I stopped. I need to get back to it and I need to figure out how to do it without allowing it to affect my emotions, which is
yeah.
very hard. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I know how important that is because that's how you're going to be able to write your story
Right.
when you
Yeah.
share that.
And
So,
I remember counseling, we talk about how to desensitize myself when I do my program for my mom. It doesn't
yeah,
always work, right? But just find that way. But then just keep writing, even if you have those emotions, and then
yeah.
you'll look at it later back and edit it. But just keep writing because
Yeah,
even when you're
that's
writing,
what I've been doing too.
yeah, it's
Just brainstorming it. Just get it out.
get it
Get it
all
out.
out, and
Yeah.
then even if your paper has tears, that's okay because it's therapeutic to do everything.
Right. Right.
So
Well, Mike, thanks so much for
thank
coming
you.
on, and maybe I can get you. If you're not really busy at the time, if I can rebook you,
Yeah.
and now
Love to.
I know who you are and what you do. I know now. Maybe when you send me the book, also send me the pamphlet about what you do in the comedy and all that, because I would love to book you in one of my own
Okay.
workshops or conferences, and have you come in,
Now I have
because
to write a pamphlet too. Thanks a lot, D. Now I have homework to do. You didn't mention this homework stuff beforehand. This is unfair.
I was hoping you had one. I didn't know if you had
You got a minute left and you spring homework on me. This is ridiculous. No, no, not doing it.
one.
Nope.
Well, whatever sheet you might have about how your
For
booking
you, I'll write one
information.
up. Yep. For you, I'll do one special.
Hey, now you know. Oh, I should have something like that.
Right. I know. I'm so I'm very unprepared. That's really what it is. Story
It's
of my
my
life.
marketing
Unprepared.
skills.
Yeah.
Sorry, my marketing thing.
Right.
I'm
Well,
hoping
listen.
you market yourself better.
Thank you. I need it. I need it. Yeah. But
Well,
listen,
Mike, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Um,
Thank you for having me on. And I hope whoever's listening and watching, I hope you enjoyed it and gained something valuable from our time together. So thank you.
yeah, and thank you for the info. I'm hoping many will, contact you. You
Okay,
know,
come stalk me. It's fine. It's good.
yeah. Yeah, because it's. I mean, lately I've been getting so many wonderful guest speakers that have really, really
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome is an understatement. That has really been educating, the community, and that's my goal anyway for this season is let's educate the community.
Right.
So,
Okay.
well, thank you, Michael,
Thank you.
and I look forward to hearing from you. And I'm glad we're friends on Facebook,
Me
so I
too.
can keep up with you and
Everything.
your comedy and stuff like that. And I'm
Thank you.
enjoying so much of the different comedies that I'm hearing
Good.
and seeing, and I'm like, oh my god,
Keep laughing.
this is why we need to have Michael on as our entertainment for the conference because
Right.
you know
Exactly.
you know exactly what everybody's going through. So
Right.
okay,
Well, all right.
have
Thank you.
fun
Have a good 7 o'clock podcast too. All right. Bye.
and have a good summer for you.
Thank you.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.
Oh, stay on for a minute because I think